Hey everyone, I'm Allison.
I'm Bryce.
And we're Better Half Reviews. And today we're talking about Tapestry. It's a game designed by Jamie Stonemaier, and the art is by Andrew Bosley, and it's published by Stonemaier Games.
In Tapestry, you're creating a civilization and taking it through history. So let's check it out.
Alright. So this is the setup of Tapestry with a two-player setup. We're just showing one of the boards here. There are two sides of this board for different players, 1 to 3, and on the other side is 4 and 5. In a two-player game, you get given different maps. They have numbers on them, so you get either like the 3 and 5, the 2 and 4, or the 1 and 6. So in our case, we had the 1 and 6, and we picked the 1 map. And since we have the 1 map, you're going to put one of your outposts on the same spot that the number has. So we have a 1. Here's the 1 and 6 spot, so my outpost will go there. Every player is handed 2 of these different factions. You pick one and discard the other. So in this case, we picked the Inventors. Each faction has different abilities. We won't go into those right now, but you'll have different setups available for each of them. So in this one, we'll have different cubes on our board. Everybody needs to put one of their cubes on each of the tracks, and for the scoring track, you got your Tapestry cards and your tech cards, and there's different dice. So we've got a science die, and then the red and black die are military die. You set up your player board with all of your buildings, and make sure you have one of each resource token. There are also buildings that are set aside on the building board. Those will be used later in the game. There are extra buildings, they don't have a board, so they're just set off to the side right now. So the rules are simple for this game. You have 2 options. You can either get income or advance on one of these tracks.
Taking the gain income action advances you each round. So to start the first round, you would gain income. Here on the player board describes what would happen during the gain income phase. You have numbers 1 through 5 that shows which round that action will be taken in. So in the first round, you only earn income. You don't worry about these other parts of the income action. So on the first round, we ignore these first 3, and I only earn income from what's showing on my player board. So I'd earn 1 of each resource. This symbol counts victory points for how many tech cards I have, which at the beginning of the game is 0. This symbol counts victory points based on this board, which there's nothing on, so it's 0. This symbol allows me to pick up a tile, and this symbol allows me to pick up a Tapestry card. And I add that to my hand. Play then passes to the next player for their income turn. So on my next turn, now I can advance on any one of the advancement tracks. Each of the advancement tracks has a similar setup. You have these spaces that you'll move up throughout the game. You'll have some sort of action or bonus that you can gain for moving into that space. And then you have the cost for the advancement.
So when you're moving up the advancement track, you can't skip spaces unless you have something that lets you. So if I'm moving up the advancement track, you move to the next space and pay the cost. So this says any one resource.
So let's say I move this mushroom from 1 to 0.
So since you've spent the resource, you can now gain the spoils, and this is 2 different land tiles. If on another turn I would move up here, again, you have to pay any one resource, and then, like Bryce mentioned earlier, this is a bonus. You don't have to pay it if you don't want to, but if you want to gain that bonus, pay an extra resource and gain a Tapestry card. And on here, this one has a slash, so it means do one or the other. Some spots will have these little symbols around it, and that will let you calculate some points and add it to your score right then.
If you are one of the first people to move across one of these ages, you get a special building. So here we would receive the lighthouse. It's a 2x2 building, and we could place it anywhere on our board here. But when you place a building on this board, you can't cover up any one of the red dots. If you're having trouble placing it, you can actually have it hang over off the board. We won't go over all the details of every track, but just go over some generalities. On the exploration track, you're gaining land tiles and putting those tiles out on the board. Also on the exploration track, you're able to put out the farms onto your player board here. As you put out these buildings, they're uncovering additional resources or additional ways to score. On the science track, you're able to roll the dice and usually advance up on one of the other tracks. The science track allows you to place any of the houses. On the military track, it allows you to place out outposts onto different lands, so you're able to expand your empire When you expand onto a new land, you roll the dice and choose one as a bonus. So here, I could score, or I could choose an additional resource. Also, the military track allows me to put out the armories from my player board. Finally, the technology track allows me to gain technology cards, and these technology cards give me bonuses throughout the game if I'm able to upgrade that technology. And when I gain the technology, I put it next to my player board. And when it advances, it moves up. The technology board also allows me to place out these markets. Once you've exhausted all your resources, or you're ready to move on to the next era, you'll take an income turn as your action. So if we take an income turn and we're moving to round 2 or era 2, we'll look at which one of these has the 2 next to it, which is all of them, and take all of these actions. So this first one means that I do whatever's on my faction card. The second one allows me to put down a Tapestry card. If I'm the first person of my neighbors, either left or right, to put down a Tapestry card for this era, then I gain an additional resource. When you're choosing which Tapestry card to put down, just know that they have some era-specific effects. So depending on when you play them, they could be good for this era, or they could be good to save for other eras. This next square allows me to upgrade one tech card. Here I have just this one. I could upgrade it and gain the bonus. And then I score victory points based off the victory point symbols that are available on my player board. Finally, once I've scored victory points, I'll gain income in the amount of symbols that are shown on my player board. So here, I have 2 of each symbol. Since I already have 1 of these symbols, I'd go up to 3, and I'd move that symbol up to 2. I'd also gain a land tile and another Tapestry card.
So let's talk about the scoring for each of these different options. So on this level, it has the tech card symbol, so you would get 1 point for every tech card you have. So we would increase by 1 point, and we move our little marker up. This one is getting points for your map. So let's take a look at the map. So when you're scoring your map, you get points if you have completed rows or columns. So if I had my lighthouse here, and these 2 buildings here, these red dots count as occupied or unavailable spaces. So I would have a complete row right here. So that would gain me at least 1 point. As you're building up your map more, you want to try to fill in the spaces to get more points. If you happen to fill in an entire square, see how it has the extra lines there? So it's like a Sudoku square. So if we fill up this whole square entirely, I gain an additional resource. So this one lets you, when you reveal these, lets you get points for the number of outposts you have taking over different spaces. And this track just lets you get different amounts of points. So the more you build up all these buildings, the more options of resources and points available throughout the game.
Sometimes you score points based off of the number of territories you control. So here, because white and red are the only ones on those territories, they would control the territories they're on. However, if white were to put a second building on that territory, it would knock over red's outpost, and white would start controlling that territory. Each territory can only have 2 buildings, so once another player has conquered a territory, that would be it for that space.
So when you do the action to put out a land tile, if you match it up with the terrain around it, you get additional points for each side. So here I match up with the desert, so I would get 1, and then I match it here 2, 3 with the water, 4 with the water, I would move up that many points. And you gain whatever bonus is on your tile right there.
However, notice how if there is different terrains on a tile, that it only takes up about half the tile. If I had placed this tile this way, on this side, the desert and the water don't match up, so I wouldn't score a point for that side. But I'd still score a point here for having water and water, here for water and water, and here for water and water.
There's also these bonuses available throughout the game. So if you are like the first to complete these, you would get 10 points. You'd put one of your little squares there, and the second person would get 5. So this one, complete any advancement track, topple 2 opponent outposts, and then conquer the middle island. So when you're finished with your 4th round, moving into the 5th, that's the final round. All you're going to do is your faction ability, and then collect your points from your board.
Once you're done scoring those points and everybody else has scored their points for their 5th income round, the game's over.
And whoever has the highest score on the track will win. If there is a tie, the player with the most total resources left over is the winner. Just to give you an idea, these are the pre-painted minis that come in Tapestry. There is this sheet included to give you quick summaries of each of the symbols throughout the board, and also the different tech cards available. And that's how you play Tapestry. Alright, so that's how you play the game. Let's talk about how we feel about it. Bryce, what are some of the pros?
So a pro for me is that this is a really simple game, especially for a civilization game. But it has a ton of depth of strategy. It has a ton of replayability. And I just love it.
I mean, there's tons of factions to choose from, and then your different, like, land tiles too, so there's many combinations you can make. And I love the components of the game. So, like, this is our first Stonemaier game that we've ever played, and I've always heard about, oh, it's always great production, and I'm like, yeah, and, like, the pieces look cool and everything, but, like, actually having it and using it, it's good. Because, you know, you usually get, like, these are player boards. They're thin. I mean, they have a little bit of thickness to them. But they have this, like, I don't know, what do you call it?
Like a grip or something?
Yeah.
Like a finish on it that's kind of grippy.
And at first you're like, that's really weird. But then when you're playing, you're like, ooh, my things don't, like, slide around too much. And so it's kind of nice. I like it. Very upscale.
Yeah, and, like, all the little minis and everything that come with it look really good.
And they're
feel
painted.
Really good.
The buildings are painted, like, I do want to try to learn painting minis and everything, but that's just a hobby of it in and of itself. And so getting like pre-painted minis, you're like, bam, out of the box. There's my pretty buildings instead of gray minis. But yeah, so like all the different pieces and all the little like huts and stuff that you get at the beginning, I love all the pieces, just all of it. So I kind of joked before we actually played this game. I was like, well, if I don't like this game, I've at least got a whole bunch of cool components I can use for whatever I want. But yeah.
But you like the game, don't you?
I do. And you know how he mentioned like that depth of strategy? Oh my goodness. This is one of the cons I'm going to bring up. Analysis paralysis, like hardcore analysis paralysis. Like when I play Everdell, you play the game, and as you go throughout the rounds, it gets to like that last round, and you're like, I need to stretch it as far as I can. I don't know what to do, and you sit there and think forever. That's like Tapestry. The Tapestry brings it to a whole other level, and I'm just like sitting there, and Bryce is like, I've got my next 5, turns planned out, and I'm like, okay, I think I can do this, and then if that happens, I can do this. There's just too many choices, so I take forever.
Well, that's the thing. All the choices are good choices. You can advance up any 4 of the tracks and have an equal opportunity for victory on each of the tracks.
I just have a terrible time figuring out the right combinations at the right time. But yeah, so I mean, I've had a lot of fun with it, and something that threw me off when we played is when we were looking through the rulebook. It's like, okay, let's go through this. Like, that's it. I thought this was like a quick start guide or something, and I was like, okay, go through the setup, and then okay. And I was like, no, the rest, those are guides. This is it. These are the rules. That's it.
You would expect a game like this to have like a 40-page rulebook, but
yes.
No, like I said, it's simple. This is the rulebook.
I know. And when we got finished reading it, I was like, no, I need more direction. I need more help. No, I need more. And so it felt intimidating playing our first game because the rules were just like, here you go. And I'm like, okay, I needed more words of comfort. I guess I needed more flavor text. I don't know, something. And I was just so nervous for a first game. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm moving stuff, but am I doing this right? That's how I felt.
Yeah, it's good. I think they did great with the rulebook. They kept it very simple, and then, they explain everything you might ever possibly have questions on in this reference guide. So about the cards or any of the spaces you might land on. Mm-hmm. And between that and the rulebook,
It's pretty much covered.
That covers everything you need to know.
But speaking of the reference guide, holy icons, Batman. I mean, there's games that we're still playing, and there's certain tracks that I've used more than others, and so if I use a different track than I usually do in a game, I'm like, what's that do again? What's that space mean again? So it's like, okay, got it. Like, you get the hang of it after a while, but then you start moving up a track that you haven't really done too much. You're like, can you tell that to me again? So that's one of the cons, where it has a little bit of a learning curve with all those icons.
Well, and even after, 3, 4, 5 games, you're still referencing it every now and then going, I feel like I know what this should do, but I just want to make sure.
Exactly, yeah. So if iconography is a struggle for you, this one can be a little bit hard. With more plays, you'll be more familiar with it.
But again, this is all the icons, and it has every single description that you need to know.
Yes.
So, I mean,
it's laid out well enough that you can be like, okay, you got it, and you don't have to flip through 40 pages of rules to remember what you can do on a space. So yes, that is very nice. It is laid out very well.
Or remember which page of the rule book you have to flip to find descriptions of things.
Or which rule book or which guide to look into. Not naming any names. So, do you have any other cons for the game? I think I have one other that I can think of at the moment. With the board, you have the track around to keep track of your score, and then the different tracks are all on different sides. So if you're playing on one side of the table, whatever's on the far side is upside down, and I had a harder time playing where I couldn't see the board as well. So like the track that was further away, like in our first game, the military track was far away. I didn't even touch that thing because I was like, I can't really see it, so I'm just going to play what I can see.
Yeah, it is kind of a table hog. There's a lot to put out on the table. And when you have your own player board, and then you have the board.
And your faction, and your land.
Well, it just gets far away.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a good criticism. Like, unless you really know what's on that track on the farthest away, which you have a reference right here. You might not think about it. You might not want to do stuff on that, because then you're just like having to stand up and reach across the table every turn or whatever.
So it's just like, oh, it's just upside down, and I'm like, oh, it's too far away. I'm not even gonna try it. So that was just kind of like one of my other little cons. Before you played this game, what did you think this would be like? Did this end up being how you thought it would, or better, or worse?
It definitely turned out better than I thought it would. I tend to kind of stay away from Civ games just because they sometimes get really complicated. You're like trying to manage resources and move people and build buildings and do all these things that
can take forever.
Well, no, like, I don't mind playing those games. It's just, I know you're not the biggest fan of them, so learning them and trying to get them to the table is just, like, hard. But this is definitely, like, one of the easiest Civ games that I've ever played, and I can, like, we get this to the table pretty easily.
Yeah. And this isn't your typical Civ game, kind of because, like, what he was saying, like, you put out different cards throughout the game of, like, discoveries you're making or whatever, and there's, like, cards where you can take off into space. It's like, oh, you've learned how to fly, but then your next round you'll be like in the medieval era. I can't remember all the different cards, but don't take it so like straightforward of like, okay, you built fire, so now you're gonna like build a wheel, and it doesn't always progress like that, like a regular Civ game. I would say it's kind of more freeform. So don't expect to like build up everything from fire on up, because your cards won't end up that way. And to be honest, I hardly ever focus on what those are, like on the cards. I'm like, okay, what's the ability? Okay. I kind of like glaze on over that it has a Civ feel to it. I'm like just trying to figure out the different strategies and where to go, that the theme doesn't totally stick in my head while I'm playing it.
That's fair. I agree. Like, while I'm playing with it, I'm more focused on, okay, what track do I want to move up? What am I trying to do to score points at the moment? And then I find it's fun to go back and be like, oh, here's my Tapestry cards that I laid down, and I'm a tyrant that has a republic, and or whatever, and like these are the things I invented during my time.
Yeah, that's right. Like we look at the theme afterwards, or like I love looking at how my map filled out with my different buildings and everything. But yeah, that's something I do after. So the theme works after the game for me.
No, I agree. Like the theme during the game isn't super prevalent, other than the fact that like the exploration track you're putting down tiles and moving around, and the military track you're taking over tiles, and like if you like it makes sense, but
Yeah.
you're not necessarily thinking that in the forefront of your mind.
Maybe if we get to the point where this game just feels more automatic, I can think a little bit more about the theme. But I'm not quite there yet because obviously I have a whole bunch of analysis paralysis, and I'm like, what am I going to do on my turn? I'm too busy thinking on what to do that I'm not thinking about the theme too much. But I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I still have a lot of fun playing this game. And this was actually both our picks for Game of the Month for July in one of our On the Table videos. Bryce was surprised that I picked this because this is not really my type of game, usually. But it's because it has me thinking so much and trying to figure out the game that it's just been on my mind a lot. And so that's why I picked it. But yeah, Tapestry is a very intriguing game that I fail at a lot. Because I play with him. I think I need to play with more people so I can, A, lose again, but B, maybe not lose as bad as the next person. There is a solo mode, but we haven't tried that yet. Maybe one day, but I need more plays of this game before I feel like I can just take on the automa, because I'd rather get beat by a person than by a fake person. But yeah, so I'm thinking about trying the automa sometime because then I can take as long as I want to in the game.
It'll be like a 6-hour game.
Probably. Our games have still stayed decently long because it takes so long. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But
usually I'm taking my turn as she's still finishing her turn. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. And she's like, I'm still thinking about my last turn.
It's because there's so many options. And so it's hard to decide what's the best thing to do. Because you seem to like optimize everything. And I'm like, well, I need to think which thing will be best 4 turns down the road. I'm like, it blows my mind.
Game. You don't have to play the way I play.
I'm not trying to. I'm trying to. That's why it takes me so long. Anyway. So these are our thoughts about Tapestry. I definitely think you should take a look at it if you are into super thinky and strategic games with lots of options and variations. And as for our first Stonemaier game, it's really cool looking. I love all the pieces.
Yeah, I really like the game a lot. I give it 2 thumbs up, even though that's a rating system we've never used before. I like it. I can see this getting to the table a lot. Even though it's a Civ game, which typically isn't her style, I can convince her to play it.
Mm-hmm. And one caveat, there has been an update about some of the civilizations, the factions that you can choose. There were some imbalance issues that people were finding. There's a link, I'll put a link in the description where you can find it. I think it's on BGG, but it helps adjust some of the faction abilities. I think in the expansion, Plots and Ploys, they come with like a printed sheet of that. We don't have the expansion yet, so we have to look up online, like anytime we're picking out factions, just look through there and adjust it. And we haven't had any issues. I mean, obviously he wins no matter what, so I feel like if there's anything that like adds to his stuff, like one of our last games, he had a faction that got stuff added to him, and I'm like, you don't need that, you're still gonna win, can you take it away?
Yeah, there should be like some sort of handicap system.
Yeah.
Where like you start with extra points.
Yeah.
And then try to like catch up and beat that.
Yeah. No, because then I'll still lose and then I'll still feel bad. One other thing, I don't really house rule too many games. I actually like a house rule I learned about, and we tried it on our last game.
We did?
We did.
Oh.
When you draw a tapestry card, you draw 2.
Oh, I thought you told me that was one of the changes.
No, that was a house rule.
Oh.
So, or I think so. But, so when we played some of our games before, you draw 1 tapestry card and that's your choice. And if you're not hitting spots where you get Tapestry cards, you have very limited options. And there's one game where I started up on all the tracks, and so I didn't really have chances to get Tapestry cards. And in a 2-player game, if I'm drawing cards that are like good for the end of the game, I don't really have a choice to really play anything other than that. So I really like drawing 2, picking one and discarding the other, because you feel like you have a little bit more, I don't know, ability to strategize for your game.
I agree. Like, playing that way, you can be like, well, that would be a good card later on, but I want this card now because it'll help me sooner. Whereas if you're just drawing one card, you're just like,
You're stuck with it, and that's it.
great, this is my only Tapestry card and I have to play it my next round, but it would be really good at the end of the game.
Yeah, and I had a game where I kept getting cards at the beginning that would be great for the end, and it just felt frustrating, and that helped to alleviate the frustration.
Yeah, I think that's a good house rule. I didn't even realize it was a house rule.
You're welcome. And whoever told me about it, thank you. I don't remember. Alright, so if you think this is a game for you, check it out. We both like it. Just be aware that it has analysis paralysis written all over it.
But that shouldn't stop you from enjoying this game. It's a great game.
Yes.
Anyway.
I enjoyed it too. He would enjoy it better if I took less time. Anyway. Alright, so thanks for listening to our review. Hope you enjoyed it. We also have our Instagram where we're posting daily about games we are playing, so definitely check that out. And
Be sure to like and subscribe.
here on YouTube.
And I'm Bryce.
I'm Allison.
And we did it backwards. But we're better half reviews.
I said the right name though. I'm Allison.
Happy gaming.
Hey!
Have fun.
Happy gaming! Okay. I can't talk today. Art by Andrew Bosley. Oh, that was messed up.